Give a couple seconds, then go to the maintenance and
All right, thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Joel Cardella, and I'm going to be talking to you about some stuff about defense. Now, hopefully, there's not going to be anything here that is new to you, right? Which is kind of unusual when you come to a talk. You want to come to a talk to learn some things. But I guarantee you're going to learn some terrible things because I'm going to bring you some kind of stories from the field. I've been a consultant now for a number of years after doing some other stuff. I was a CISO for a number of years. I was in network ops. I was in app dev. I ran a data center. I've been doing a lot of stuff over the last 25 years, and I've seen a lot of really awful things. And I'm hoping those awful things I can use to instruct you on how not to do awful things. Originally, my talk was going to be the negative. I was going to do all the terrible things that you're doing right now. But I'm a very glass half full kind of guy. So I'm like, no. So I had to turn it around. So we went with a positive. And I say, these are the things that you should be doing. So what I learned over the last few years, I learned from this person. Does anybody know who this is? Who is it? Vanilla Ice, that's right. And what do we learn from Vanilla Ice? What is the key piece of wisdom from Mr. Vanilla Ice? Stop, collaborate, and listen. That's right. Stop, collaborate, and listen. That is what I've learned over the years. So really the talk can end right here. Thank you very much. Right? All right. But unfortunately, we don't do that. So any of these look familiar to you? I'm certain you know Equifax. I'm certain everybody knows Equifax. And the awful breach that Equifax has experienced and is still going on, and there's still more congressional hearings that are going on around Equifax as our legislators who are not versed in cybersecurity are suddenly understanding that maybe this was worse than they initially thought, because it is, right? And it was, and it will be, and we'll continue to have problems and fallout as a result. So I imagine we're going to see things go on and on and on about Equifax. But what about some of these others? Anybody familiar with Hollywood Presbyterian? Right? Yeah. What happened with the Hollywood Presbyterian?
They had such a bad ransomware infestation, it actually took out their ability to do patient care.
That is correct. They impacted patient care because of ransomware events at Hollywood Presbyterian. It's kind of a, writing the book on the story of what not to do, right? Or what to do, and we're not doing it, right? Maybe there's a better way of saying it. How about City of Baltimore? Anybody know what happened in City of Baltimore? Same issue, ransomware. Took out their 911 services. Probably a big deal. There would be some people that would care about that, right? How about City of Atlanta? Anybody know what happened in City of Atlanta? Right? It wasn't just the airport. It was a bunch of stuff with City of Atlanta, but also ransomware. So oddly enough, there's a theme of ransomware here, although I'm not so much focused on ransomware necessarily. However, ransomware is a thing that executives understand. They get the fact that somebody is holding them hostage for money. So ransomware is one of those tools that we can use as a storytelling tool to get them to understand what we need them to understand. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. But that's really what this is all about. But let's look at the City of Atlanta. So the City of Atlanta had an incident, a ransomware incident, that took down many of the city services. Part of the airport was included in that, but police and fire were affected mostly in that city. To recover from that, I went to the City of Atlanta's website. The City of Atlanta is a public institution. They have to post their costs publicly. This is on their procurement website, and if you'd like to go there, you can go there and check it out. These are the costs so far, as of an hour ago, right, that they have put into bringing their city services back online and putting their security program in place that previously did not exist. Right? Incident response services, 60 grand. I'm a consultant. I work for a company where we do incident response services. Okay? So, sure, if you want to retain me, you can actually retain me for less than 60 grand and get incident response. Right? Not that I'm good at incident response, I'm just saying. I'm throwing it out there, right? Support staff augmentation, another 60 grand. Emergency incident response services, $650,000 to bring somebody in to say, holy crap, something's wrong, we need help, right? Advisory services on the incident response, another 600 grand, right? That's what I do, but I don't charge 600 grand. I'm probably not good enough to charge 600 grand, though, let's be fair. Microsoft Cloud, System Center, Windows 10, whatever that is, $730,000. Crisis Communication Services, $50,000 for crisis communication services, right? Et cetera, going all the way down. Desktop technicians for on-call emergency services, $74,000, right? They bought some Force Scout. They did some architecture services, 158,000. So they're doing the right things because they're looking at their stuff and going, we have something very seriously wrong. We've got to fix this, right? $1.3 million from Microsoft Cybersecurity Network Architect staff augmentation. They're doing two-factor with Duo, right? For another 212,000. Okay, anybody good at math? What's the sum total here?
4 or 5 million.
$5 million. $5 million they spent in response to an event that seriously crippled and hurt them, right? In response to. That's a so important message to send. If you are talking to somebody who wants to say to you, why is cybersecurity important? You can bring this up and you can say, because the city of Atlanta is paying $5 million just to recover and put in place things they should have had in place. Here's what I can tell you. Had they planned a security program, had they planned a budget, and had they staffed it, even staffed it thinly, they could have spent less than $5 million doing that, right? But this is after the fact. And of course, taxpayer money, right? And so part of the problem is they complain over the fact that they have limited budgets and they can't do hiring, or maybe they can't pay the ranges, the salary ranges, what have you. For all of those kinds of things that happen, you just looked at this and you go, but it could be $5 million that we're paying instead of 1.2 or 1.5 in a program that could stand up and not affect our 911 services in our airport, right? That's an important thing. So these are important lessons. So if you don't know about this kind of stuff, this is the kind of stuff that I do want you to be aware of because it helps you when you talk about this stuff. So one of the things that happened as a result is I did some digging and I found a company that actually did a survey in 2016. And this was the International City County Management Association, because there is such a thing apparently, right? And the University of Baltimore, Maryland did this survey, and they surveyed local government CIOs. And they sent them a bunch of questions. And I'm going to run through some of the questions here so you can kind of see what the responses were. Now, granted, this is government responses. However, I guarantee you're going to see some really crazy similarities in these responses for organizations that you have worked in. So here's the question. How frequently are governments under attack? If you add these numbers up for attacks, you're really leaning at 44, 45%. The actual research behind it, they think it's even higher. But this is what people are reporting, okay? And then, you know, if you're a data nerd, they had about a 12% response rate out of 3,400 people that they surveyed. So it's a decent sample size that can be extrapolated to real world types of scenarios, right? But at least once a day, half of these institutions are being attacked, which is an interesting thing, right? How about this? Cybersecurity problems are a constant concern. Did we skip one? No, that's right. Okay. So the number of attacks, incidents, and breaches that have stayed the same or increased. Have they had fewer, the same, more? Look at the don't know line, right? Across all of these data points of attacks, incidents, and breaches, at least 25% have said, we don't know if it's higher or lower. Okay? That's a problem. That's a real problem. You should absolutely know. We got to have these baselines. Do local governments keep track of cyber attacks? Yes or no? Yes is in the green, no is in the red. For attacks, the no's far outweigh the yeses. For breaches, we get a little bit better. Probably because breaches have regulations around them that require things like reporting, right? But if they don't require things like reporting, we're probably floating more toward that no. So they're not really keeping track of the stuff either. Do local government knows who's attacking them? You know, the vast majority say no. We do not know, okay? To be fair, I don't know either. If I was running an organization, I would know who it is. I wouldn't care. I just want to stop them, right? How well are they to respond to cyber threats? Now, here's what's interesting. Look at the number one, so very good, poor, excellent, right, from darker to light. And then the number one highest rated answer is recover from ransomware. Ransomware is something they understand because they've seen it in action. It's easy to understand being extorted, right? Everybody's been extorted in their life in one way or another, especially if you're married, right? Jeez, right? Then, how well are they prepared to detect attacks? I think this is kind of a lie. I think people were erring, you know, for themselves because in my experience, detection is very, very poor in organizations large and small. Or even if detection exists, actually making sense of that detection is a real problem. Can they detect incidents? Can they recover from breaches? Can they prevent breaches, recover from exfiltration, prevent it, detect it, all the way down, right? So interesting statistics. And this is, remember, this is like self-reported, so we can assume that there's some level of truth here. Are the officials and staff aware of the need for cybersecurity? So again, not aware, somewhat aware, moderately aware, or we don't know. The top appointed managers are the least served by this, so they are really not aware, the top appointed managers in local governments. The department managers don't fare much better. The average end user, really not much better than that. Elected executives, which is just, part of the management chain, right? Sort of in the same boat. Staff of counselors, kind of same thing. The elected ones, the average citizens, goes all the way up to no, we don't know, right? So we're not really aware of the need for cybersecurity. That's a telling statistic. That tells us that we need to do better. Do staff support cybersecurity efforts? Top managers, department managers, average end users, et cetera, to average citizens, right? So really, no is the vast majority or moderate support of what's going on in support for these cybersecurity efforts. And then, why aren't they practicing better cybersecurity? Here's some of the reasons that they gave. The top reason, which they say is, this is a severe barrier, this is a modest barrier, this is a small barrier, or they don't know, is the inability to pay competitive salaries. So this is interesting to me. Local governments think the reason they can't do cybersecurity is because they can't pay people correctly. Right? That's kind of a weird thing to me. Let's go back to the city of Atlanta. They just paid $5 million to recover. Right? They could have paid half that amount, built a cyber program with decent salaries. I'm not saying great salaries. It is government, right? And we all know you don't work for government for the money. You work for job security, right? Because you're going to have a job forever. That's why you do it, okay? But they think that inability to pay people is their biggest barrier. That's very strange to me. Insufficient number of staff, definitely. Have run into that in my career. Lack of funds. Okay, I can get behind lack of funds. We apparently had the funds to recover, though, because we had to, right? We had to break it out in the emergency. Lack of trained personnel, lack of end-user accountability, trained to hire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of conception in the world, this world, the local government world, or let's extrapolate it and say the business world, of in the minds of managers, because remember these are CIOs responding, that these are the things that are the problems for them, the barriers to them creating good security. And I'm going to suggest that these really aren't real barriers. They're more mentally constructed barriers. They're not actual barriers. Because if we sat down and we drew it out, even on the back of a napkin, and we said, this is what it would take, I think a lot of people would be surprised. And what I'm here to tell you is, when I do this as a consultant, a lot of people are surprised. Yeah, this is what it takes for us to do this and this and this. Because we don't need to buy the entire farm to do this. And this is the point. We're boiling an ocean, and we don't need to boil an ocean. We need to work on things one small step at a time. That's what I'm here to tell you about. So the very first thing, the very, very first thing that you are going to be doing defensively is communicate. That's the very first thing you're going to be doing. Now, communication is tricky, especially with security people. We hear this a lot. We hear about the fact that we talk tech, we say things they don't understand. We're guilty of a lot of things. We really are. So when you are communicating, what you need to do is you need to put yourself in the mind of the other person, and the communication that you have has to speak to the questions that the other person is asking, not the questions you think you need to address. And that's a really important point. The other person, when you're talking to them about anything, they're first thinking, why is this important to me? So when you're communicating a message, you have to communicate why it is important to them, why they personally have a stake in whatever it is you're doing. That's a super important thing. Okay? So if you want to communicate a concept or a program, or you're pitching a tool, or you're trying to say, hey, this is a better way to do something, here's a better process, you have to pitch it in a way that gives them the importance of why it's important to them. Does that make sense? It's an important concept. Okay? And it does take you out of your role of what you're doing and put you in the mind of that person you're talking to. Which means what? When you're doing this, if you're talking to an IT admin, it's a different conversation than if you're talking to an end user, than if you're talking to an executive, than if you're talking to a peer. Those are 4 different communications that have to happen because of that question, why is it important to me? Second question, what do I need to do? You're telling me this information, what do I need to do? Right? Take action. What is the action that I need to take based on what you're telling me? Hey, we're rolling out multi-factor authentication. I need everybody to participate. So I did this. When I was a CISO, I had multi-factor rolled out across the entire organization. It was rolled out globally. I was responsible for North America. And we were using the Google Suite, and we were using the Google two-step authentication method, right? And this was something brand new to users. They had never encountered anything like multi-factor authorization at the time. And at the time, it was fairly new too. It's sort of old hat now. People are used to it a lot more. But back then, they were not used to it. And so we had to really send a message. And I had multiple meetings with my users. I had to sit down with them. I had to explain to them why it was important for them to do this, why it was a benefit for them. And I had to do it over and over and over, to some people the same message over and over and over until they got it. Because at the end of the day, it was happening whether they wanted it to or not, right? But I couldn't sit on my laurels and I couldn't say, well, it's going to happen. Sorry, right? I needed to communicate to them why it was important. This is why it's important to you. This is the action that you need to take. Sign up for it now. Start using it now. Get involved now. Understand that it's going to be a benefit to you. Okay? And the other question is, how's it going to hurt me? So, why is it important to me? What do I need to do? And how's it going to hurt me if I don't? Well, it's going to hurt you in that you're not going to be able to log into anything because your second factor is not going to work, right? Or whatever we're talking about. But those are really important questions when you're communicating to your users or to your managers or to your IT admins or to your executives or to the world at large, right? Different conversations, that you understand their point of view. It's a really important thing to understand their point of view. That's one way to do it. So believe it or not, this is a defensive tactic. You know why? Because you're educating people. And when you educate people, they start to come around to the kinds of things that you need to do. And maybe when we talk about a ransomware event that could potentially take down all of our city services, somebody goes, yeah, that really makes sense to me. I understand that. And then you can go through these things. The next thing you need to do is you need to align. This is more important than probably anything I can tell you today. You can't build a house without a blueprint. Now let me say this. There are people out in the world that can build houses without blueprints. Generally though, they're very, very skilled, they have a tremendous amount of experience, and they probably have a significant amount of raw talent. There are very few of us in InfoSec that have all those three of those things and can just walk in somewhere and say, security, magic, right? And it's done. That really can't exist. So you have to align yourself in some way, shape, or form to a blueprint. And the best blueprints out there are already there for you. For instance, we have security frameworks that you can use. Anybody recognize this? This is the NIST cybersecurity framework, okay? Identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. Really easy concepts to roll out. If you are trying to build security or do a thing, whatever that thing is, okay, the NIST CSF is your friend because you're able to follow what it's saying, put it into these family categories, and draw some conclusions from that. You can use this to say, how are we doing today? This is what a lot of people do with me. They contract with me, and I walk in there and I set a baseline for them, and I'll take something like this and I'll say, this is what we're going to measure you against. Where are you with Identify? How are you doing with things like governance? How are you doing with risk assessments? How are you doing with awareness and training? Right? Well, baseline. Or we can say, we're pretty good, we understand this, we want to know how we can do better. And you can align yourself to something like this. Okay? But here's the awesome thing. Let's say the NIST CSF is not really up your alley. There's more for you to pick from. Anybody recognize this? Right? So 20 critical controls, or the CIS critical security controls is what they're called now. Anybody know what's wrong with this picture? Anybody? I'm glad you said that because you should know that. They just changed it. The 20 critical controls, the CIS critical controls are ordered in a very specific way by priority. So control number 1 is the first thing you should do. Control number 20 is the last thing you should do. Not in a serial kind of sense, but in a programmatic approach sense. I should spend the most time and effort ensuring that I have everything in control 1 in place before I start to build anything out because it's a foundational control. And they've just switched secure configurations and reducing admin. So reducing admin now is number 3. It's a really big control. It's an important thing. I've advocated for this for years. I've said, hey, we got to reduce admin. That's a really important thing. We're going to talk about that later too. Okay? But this is a way for you to understand, align, measure, build, and get some understanding of the things you're trying to do. Because what's nice about the security controls is they use business language to describe what it is they're trying to do. And they're based on community standards, which is nice. So all of these controls have evolved from people like you, people who have contributed, people in the field who have said, hey, you know what? I think we should be doing this. This sounds like a really good idea. Let's have a discussion about it. They have a discussion about it. They come to consensus and say, yeah, this is something that everybody should do. It's a really good control. Boop. And they create a control set from it. So community standards. If you don't like that, if you want to get just as simple as you possibly can, anybody recognize this? This is from Australia. This is the Australian Defense Signals Directorate, which is sort of, I guess, their version of the CIA, FBI, kind of rolled into one, a little bit of DOD in there, I guess. But they have created programs that have looked at cybersecurity, and they came up with this catch, match, patch thing. And really, this is what they're saying. They're saying, we need to catch it, so we have to detect it, which means we need to know about it. We need to match it, which means we have to match it against something that's known, so like a CVE database. And we have to patch it so it doesn't become a problem. Catch, patch, match. That's a little out of order for me, because I always think it the other way. But, right, catch, patch, match. That's what we're trying to do, in very, very simple terms. Now, here's what's super interesting. All three of those frameworks, they all basically agree on the same things. They all use priority 1 NIST controls. So there's the NIST 853, and if you've ever read the NIST 853, it's some serious bathroom reading, right? It is so dry. The really interesting thing about NIST 853 is nobody's ever done it fully, completely. Even the government who designed it has never really fully implemented a full NIST 853 because it's so massive. You're talking about almost 1,700 controls in a NIST 853. And I get calls from customers who say, we want to do a NIST 853, assessment. And we're like, do you really? Well, yeah, we want to be compliant. Okay, but nobody in the world is compliant. Do you really want that? So we try to talk about it in NIST CSF because it's a little bit easier to handle. But they all use those priority 1 NIST controls. So all of these frameworks have said, yeah, these are the most important things for us to do when it comes to cybersecurity, okay? They also build foundations. Every one of those frameworks that I showed you, they build foundations first before they deal with advanced topics. And that's really important too. You have to build those foundations before you can move on to the advanced topics. And very often we get caught up in the rush, right? There's the daily fires we have to put out. There's the things that we have to deal with that are the keeping the lights on kind of activities, and those sometimes take us away from what we need to do foundationally. But you really have to be disciplined. You have to be able to take a breath. You have to say, okay, I need to lay a foundation and then build off that foundation. And I'll show you what some of those foundations are. And then the risk mitigated by the foundations, believe it or not, just the foundational work, there have been studies that have been shown as high as 93% risk mitigation by just doing foundational control work. 93%. What I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but it's a great story, is that when Australia did theirs, they measured it at 93%, but thought nobody would believe it, so they cut it back to 80% and said, mitigate 80% of your risk, just so they could market the program, right? Again, don't know if it's true, but it's pretty interesting, right? But think about that. If you could address 80 to 90% of the noise and the crap, you could then focus on the remaining 10 to 20% and really make a difference. Really advance yourself, advance your organization, advance the discipline, advance the industry. We would all benefit from that just by focusing on foundational controls. And that's really what I'm here to tell you about. The things you should be doing defensively today are all foundational in nature. And if they're not, you need to start having those conversations. You need to start the alignment, and you need to start thinking about how can we build this strong foundation of which everything else is built off of. Right? And you can do it. I don't care where you're at in your organization. I don't care if you're an intern. I don't care if you're a CISO. You can do it. You have the ability to influence this and to strengthen these foundations. And then the big thing you have to do is this, right? You have to take action. You don't have a choice. We can sit and we can talk about it all day, but you have to do something. Okay? My suggestion to you is that you do it the same way you eat an elephant, which is what? 1 bite at a time, right? One bite at a time. We're going to take action. We don't have to boil the ocean. We can take small actions that have big results over time. That is totally appropriate. Okay? You can do this. Again, doesn't matter where you are in the organization, doesn't matter what you do as your job, you can influence this by taking action and building on these foundations. So what are they? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to manage your assets, right? And we're going to do an office space theme because I was in an office space mood earlier. Okay? You need to have proper asset management. I can't tell you how many times I have gone to clients and I have talked about stuff and I've said, show me your asset list. And they either don't have it or it's like an Excel sheet with a bunch of stuff on it, but they have no understanding of asset management. Asset management is a process. It's a process by which you are aware of the assets that come and go within your network. Okay? So you know when something is on the network. You know when something disconnects from the network. You know if that device is authorized or not on your network. That's asset management. This is the sort of ITIL concept. You guys familiar with ITIL, right? The IT Infrastructure Library, set of corporate processes that sort of govern a lot of this IT stuff. But the ITIL asset management process is really all about that. And assets, assets is, really we're talking about everything. We're not just talking about endpoints. We want endpoints, we want servers, we want network devices, we want mobile devices. We want anything that you could consider to be part of the network, so basically an IP addressable piece of equipment, to be part of our asset management methodology, right? And again, this is a foundational thing. The basic foundation of this suggests we cannot build proper security around anything if we don't know whether or not it exists. That's what asset management seeks to do for us. It says, hey, these are the things we have. They're authorized. Keep in mind, assets are not just physical, they're also logical. Software is an asset. You should have an authorized software list. If you don't have an authorized software list, go, take action, start building one. Get somebody to sign off on it to say, yeah, that's the official list. It's okay if it's not perfect the first time. You can iterate. There's nothing wrong with that, right? One bite at a time. Incremental improvement. It works. Okay? So asset management, the very first thing you need to start doing is look at asset management. That is the foundation for everything. All the frameworks agree on it. They're all going to tell you to do asset management as a priority. Second thing, reduce administrative privilege. I can't stress this enough. Now, I have done this. I have been in the middle of it when it has been done. I have helped clients do it. There's a lot to this. There's a lot of political issue with reducing administrative privilege. And the root issue is this. When you tell any person that you're going to take something away from them, whether or not they use it or not, they're going to resist, right? It does not matter. You have not used that pen in 10 years, but you took that pen off my desk, right? Like it's a big thing for people. They really, really are freaked out about it. So you have to approach this somewhat with kid gloves, but you want to make sure that that at the end you are doing the thing that you are looking to do, which is reduce privilege. Okay? We don't want escalation of privilege attacks to be easy. We want escalation of privilege attacks to be hard. We want somebody to be able to gain admin by using tips and techniques that are difficult, not just simply rating a user account. Right? That's the difference between that 80-20 rule. If for 80% of the time, if I can reduce the admin privilege and reduce the possibility of that happening, I can focus on the remaining 20% and deal with the really cool ways that people are trying to escalate privilege by like stealing Kerberos tokens and things, right? Kerberosting, I guess, is what they call it, right? But reducing admin, really important. Foundational. Reduce admin privilege. Have these conversations. Why do you need administrative privilege, Mr. Person or Mrs. Person? Why do you need all that privilege to do what you're doing? Well, I have to do this and this and this. Could we find another way to do it? Here's a question. Any IT admins in the room? Anybody like server admin or anything like that? Do you have more than one account? You do? That's good. Because this is a conversation that hurts a lot, especially in small organizations. When you tell IT admins that you want to reduce their admin privilege, they freak out. I can't do my job. Whoa. The word is reduce, not eliminate. Okay? All I want is when you're an admin and you need to do admin things, you can have elevated privilege. But when you're not an admin, I don't want you to have elevated privilege, because from a risk perspective, that's better for everybody. That's even better for you, because you inadvertently can't do something bad. So everybody knows what insider threat is, right? You know what 1/3 of the causes of insider threat are? Or 1/3 of the insider threats are human error. Fully 1/3 of inside threat is human error. So you, as a person with elevated privilege, have a 33% possibility of committing an error with elevated privilege. Let's reverse that. And let's say, no, I have a 66% chance of not committing it because I don't have that privilege, right? When I don't need it, specifically. But reducing admin, very, very important thing. Harden configs, right? You want to harden your configurations. You want to have good configurations that you're confident in, that you're able to deploy, that you don't have to fiddle with later to make them secure, okay? So really what we're talking about here is a standard security baseline, whatever that baseline may be. Now for me, what I always say is, there is no router or firewall in the world today that should be running Telnet. Dear God, why? Okay? Look up the RFC for Telnet. Everybody knows what an RFC is, right? Request for comment, and they're numbered. RFCs are numbered. And when these protocols are being designed, way back when, like before I was born even, and that's a long time, okay? RFCs are numbered. Telnet is RFC 15. Which means it was never designed to be a secure protocol. Which means we can't just secure it later. It was never designed or architected to be secure. That's why we have SSH, right? We don't use Telnet, we use SSH. FTP is the same way. FTP was never designed as a secure protocol. SFTP was. Okay, this is really easy. In a hardened configuration or a secure configuration perspective, then what we say is, why do we ever have anything that's running with Telnet or FTP? Now, to be fair, there are cases for Telnet out there. You're going to have exceptions, right? I'm being a little bit hardline with that. But at the same time, you should be asking those questions. Why? Why would these services be on if we don't need them? I don't care what the service is. So for a standard secure hardened configuration, do not run anything out there that doesn't need to be run. So again, in your communication, ask these questions, right? Talk to the people who are responsible for this stuff and go, if you have network administrators that are administrating over Telnet, ask them why. Why are you using Telnet? Chances are they don't need to. Chances are it's just what they've always done, or it's just what always been available, or there's some crappy ass open source tool that they're using that's doing it, right? I mean, that's the big chance. And it's very easy to switch, and it doesn't cost you anything. And it's relatively painless. I mean, there's so much benefit to not worrying about that, right? Secure configs. Now here's the big one. This is the big one, vulnerability management. It's hard to do. Hard to do right. So this is the whole patch of catch, match, patch, right? Vulnerability management is more about patching, though. It definitely encompasses patching. It definitely means that we have to patch our systems. And the reason we patch our systems, why do we patch systems? Like seriously, why do you think that we would bother to patch a system in the first place? Does anybody? You guys just kind of do it, right? Because it's the right thing to do. But have you ever thought about why? Why do you do it? Well, let me ask you this. Why do you run antivirus? Does antivirus stop all your viruses? It avoids being exploited? Occasionally. Okay, no, that's fine. That's a good answer. It avoids being exploited occasionally, right? What's that? It does reduce risk, right? Patching reduces risk, and that's kind of an easy answer. But really, what it does, what patching does, what antivirus does, is it lessens the noise so we can pull the signal out. That's really what it's doing. So if we are good at detection, okay, and we have quelled the detectors so they're not detecting every friggin' CVE in the database, we now have a signal that we can use to say, hey, I can do something with this. You can take an action, right? That's the most important thing. So that's really the point of patching and vulnerability management. It is to reduce risk, without a doubt. It is to stop some exploits from happening. But really what it is to allow us to focus on the things that we need to focus on and just do better in that arena. Because to be fair, there are some things that just can't be patched. Anybody running old Java versions in their environment? Like, this is the thing, yeah, you're going to. It's going to happen. You've got developers that have developed custom applications on old Java stacks. Java comes around, builds a new stack that breaks your application. You can't patch it. It happens. We understand that it happens. So knowing that it happens, let's take care of all the other stuff so we can focus maybe some detection around that concept and then be able to do something with it that's better. Right? Does that make sense? Like, that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to give ourselves the opportunity to do better with what we have, building these foundations. So those are really the foundational stuff that they say if you do those things, asset management, reducing administrative privilege, building secure configurations, and doing good vulnerability management, which is a cyclical process, right? It's not a one-time. It's we scan, we patch, we scan, we patch, we scan, we patch, we make sure it's remediated, et cetera, et cetera. If you can do those things, maybe about 80% of your risk can be mitigated, or 80% of that signal, or that noise can be quelled so you can concentrate on what's left over and you can do cool stuff. But let's further reduce it. How can we further reduce it? One of the big things, and again, this is a hard one, network separation. So important. Lateral movement is something that exploits use a lot. And if you can segregate a network so you can maybe not stop lateral movement, but slow it down, you win, right? You win. And I'm not even talking about complex hard stuff. So I have a former colleague who went to work for a trading company in Chicago. They're day traders or something, whatever they do. And he has an 18-month network segregation project in his pipeline. 18 months to segregate his network. He's doing intense amounts of segregation because they're a financial firm. There's all kinds of regulatory stuff that they have to do. And there's a ton that he's putting into it. I am not suggesting that you need to do this at that level, because you don't. You can do network separation today very easily. First of all, if you have a server network or a device network that uses a management network to connect, separate from your business network, those can be segregated. And by the way, just constructing VLANs isn't network separation. We're talking about true separation where we're prohibiting the ability to jump from one network to another. That's a very important concept, right? So if we can separate the networks, if we can separate our management network from our business network, we've done a good thing. Let's go even further. Can we separate based on our users? Do we have classes of user that we can separate from each other? Does every device on our network need to talk to every other device? The answer is probably no. There haven't been many networks I've ever seen where you needed that. Maybe distributed networks that required computing power because everything was peer-to-peer. Okay, something like SETI at home, or the SETI stuff that NASA does, like they use massive distributed computing capabilities. Okay, they need to talk to each other. I get that. But for most business environments, you don't need that. So think about it. Think about City of Atlanta. The services that went down were not related departments. Fire, police, airport. But I can bet you one thing, and I have no inside knowledge of this, just looking from the outside, I went, yep, they had one big flat network. One big flat network that everything was on under one IP space. I know that's true because I see it all the time. And I know that's true for you because I see it all the time, right? It happens. So think about it. How can you separate the network? What logical divisions can you draw through your network that would allow you to slow down lateral movement? And then have those conversations. And then do some testing. This isn't hard. It's not hard stuff to do. But again, don't boil the ocean. We want to do it small pieces at a time. Let's see what we can do and then make it happen. Take action. Taking action is the most important part. How about application whitelisting? I thought it was pretty appropriate. I looked for a long time to find an image for application whitelisting, but I thought this one was good. Right? Application whitelisting. Now, what I'll say about this is, so in the critical controls, for example, for a while, the critical controls went through and they sort of had this concept of standard and advanced. And they've gotten rid of that in the most recent version because what they were finding was people were afraid of the word advanced and they were moving away from it. But to be fair, application whitelisting is somewhat advanced. And it is not something that you want to take lightly because it will break your business environment and you will get a lot of grief for it. However, I can also tell you that it can be done because I did it. I did it in a global environment, okay, where we had it down to granularizing ActiveX controls. We only allowed certain ActiveX controls to execute, which were basically based on some custom stuff that was running within the network. And everything else was squashed. And it was hard, and there was a lot of fine-tuning that we had to do. But we had a good tool. It's owned by CyberArk now, if you care. It's it used to be called Viewfinity, but it's whatever CyberArk calls it now. And we were able to work with it. And for the 12,000 users that we had that were affected by it, we definitely had impact. There was business impact, but we were able to quickly react to it. And once the impact went away, they didn't even know it was running, which was awesome. So application whitelisting is a great thing. You also have, if you're a Microsoft shop, you have AppLocker. AppLocker is not an end-all be-all. It won't suppress everything, but it will stop custom Windows binaries from executing. And a lot of exploits use custom Windows binaries, or sometimes they use custom Windows libraries that AppLocker will block. Okay? You can do this. You can look into this and set this up. It's a little bit more advanced, but it's absolutely within your capability to do. And again, the more of this stuff that you suppress, the more noise that's being suppressed, the more signal that's rising, the more effective and better you are. How about this one? Everybody's favorite, multi-factor, right? Yay, multi-factor. Here's the cool thing about multi-factor. I have a prediction, okay? So this is 2018 for the video. This is 2018, May of 2018. The NYDFS, okay, the NYDFS, which is the New York Department of Financial Services, published a series of rules that people have to abide by. And within that series of rules, multi-factor is called out as an explicit rule that they have to use. So if you have to follow the banking law and you do business in New York, for example, you must have multi-factor authentication for your sensitive data. Very interesting. The SEC recently issued guidelines, and they said, hey, we really like what New York is doing. We want all public companies to do that. Now, these are only guidelines. The SEC can't actually pass the rules yet. But what we have seen is based on SEC guidelines that eventually becomes law. So we could actually see multi-factor becoming required as a regulation. Everybody's got to do it. We know how good it is. We also know how easily it can be defeated, because if you just social engineer the user, multi-factor doesn't mean anything. Okay? However, from a remote standpoint, I can't remotely exploit a system that uses a user account, even with elevated privilege, if multi-factor is enabled. And that's a really good control for us. So right now it helps. Right now it is a good tie-in to all the things that we're doing, and it's really not terribly expensive. It's built in to some products. Microsoft has it built in to their products. Duo, we all know Duo, they're around here. Okta is another one that we see a lot. Jump Cloud is another one. There's a bunch of people out there that are doing it. Google does it by default on the Google stuff, right? So it's good stuff. But have these conversations. If you don't have multi-factor, it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't have to use RSA tokens for everything. You could, right? But almost everybody's got a smartphone now. And if I've got a smartphone, I just run an app. I run Google Authenticator, and I run whatever on here. I do that. For God's sakes, I'm a gamer. I've got some MMOs that I have multi-factor enabled on. I don't care. I didn't spend any money on them. It's all free to play because I'm cheap. I can actually spend money to play your game. Okay? But I don't want you stealing my stuff. So I put multi-factor on my account. So don't steal my stuff. Account controls. Account controls are so important. So we talked about reducing admin. But what about having other account controls? Right? Milton Wadhams was on the payroll for how long before they fixed the glitch? 6 months, right? Those of you who've seen Office Space. He was an employee for 6 months before they fixed the glitch. You need to have proper account controls, which means you have to have processes that support them. So HR processes, typical HR processes, onboarding, job change, termination, or offboarding, or joiners, movers, and leavers, if you will, right? You need to have these processes defined. They don't even have to be good, but they need to be defined. And then once they're defined, they can be refined, and you can make them better, and you can be better. But these should exist in your environment. You should have account controls, ways of creating user accounts based on an action, ways of changing user accounts when someone has a job change so they don't have more access than they need, and then ways of eliminating the access when that person leaves, or in some way disabling or otherwise changing that so it can move out. Now, this is covered by a lot of regulation out there. If you look at PCI, if you look at HIPAA, these are called out specifically in those regulations. But you might work for a place that does not necessarily have to abide by the specific regulations that are out there. Still very good practices, okay? So HR processes. So really, people, process, technology. is what we're talking about here, right? We've got a people component to everything. We're going to communicate. We got the process component, stuff like this, specific HR processes. And then our technology component. How do we, how can we really do this? Network separation, for instance, we can't do it without technology. It's got to be done at the firewall, right? Or at the router, right? Good stuff. Here's my final piece of advice to you. Document everything. And I'm not kidding. Every single client I've ever had, I've been consulting for 3 years, every single one of them has had insufficient documentation. Some of them call us up because they're going to get audited. And the very first thing I walk in and I say is, you're going to fail your audit. Because the first thing an auditor looks for is documentation. What do I do? Show me the document. Prove it to me that you're doing it. So give me the evidence that you're actually doing it. And you can't prove it if you don't have it documented. I'm not kidding when I say document everything. This is this thing that nobody ever does. They save it for last. I'm guilty of this myself. Okay, absolutely guilty of it myself. But it's so important. I can't tell you how important it is, especially if you're doing incident response or forensic investigation, that documentation helps you. When you can pull something out and you can say, this is the way it was supposed to be, and you can compare that to what actually happened, you have a world of information to work with. Okay? Things like data maps. I've talked to people about data maps. They're like, what's a data map? A data map is really simple. A data map illustrates where data sits in your network. Kind of looks like a network diagram, except that it's based on data. I've got this data that sits on these servers. I've got this data that sits on these servers. And maybe I've got the classifications of that data within there, right? So a data map is a great exercise. I've got APIs in there called out that show how the data moves through those APIs, especially if they're public facing. So a data map is a really good piece of documentation. Process documentation. How do we do this thing? My joiners, movers, and leavers. How do people join? How do they get accounts? How do they job change? How do they offboard? Right? All these things, incredibly important stuff. And again, this should not be new information. I'm really hoping nobody's going, oh, that's amazing. We should be doing that, right? What you should be doing is going, yeah, that makes sense. We should be doing that if we're not. That's what I'm hoping is happening. Okay? So with that, we have a few minutes left that we can do questions and answers. Well, questions anyway. I won't guarantee answers, right? So does anybody have any questions about anything I've talked about? Yeah. Sure.
More of a comment on your guides, right? Your list and the sand.
Yeah, the frameworks.
State of Michigan and Oakland County, Wayne County developed the
SciSafe
program. So if you're out here looking for a way to square yourself easily, go to the Michigan Cyber, look it up, SciSafe, and it's out there. It will help you. It's very useful.
Yep.
We use it internally at Wayne County just because we helped sort of develop it. So I did have first peek at it before it went out, and so it's.
And it just got updated. So for the purposes of the video, we're talking about frameworks. Another framework out there is SciSafe, right? So SciSafe you can get at the State of Michigan website. There are a lot of states right now that are looking at it. They're looking to adopt it. It just got updated about a month ago. The company I work for, CBI, Chris Burrows is the CISO from Oakland County that helped develop that. So we kind of have a good laser into that, so that's pretty good. But yeah, absolutely. SciSafe was based on kind of the stuff I'm talking about here. They took the best elements from a bunch of stuff and said, what works best for us for government? And they put it together in a comprehensive package, put some metrics behind it, put some other sort of common questions behind it, made it easy to use, right? Which is sort of the goal of all this. And you could do the same thing. You could look at something like CSF, NIST CSF, and you could be like, it doesn't apply to me 100%. That's okay. You're still aligning. It's still a blueprint. Okay? Even a bad blueprint is a good blueprint, or is a blueprint. And it's something you can build from. And then once you can't go past that, you go to the next thing. You go to the next thing, right? We keep constructing. We keep doing this stuff. What else? Anybody else? Questions or comments? No? All right. Oh, no, we have one.
So you said you've been doing, you've been working with companies for a couple years now, plus some other horror stories.
You want to share horror stories? So I'll tell you the worst thing. So the worst thing I ever saw was I walked into an organization that was they were a US only organization, but they were spread across multiple locations. And they were so incredibly siloed. No teams could talk to other teams. And this was a cultural issue that they had. All of their problems were cultural. It wasn't so much that they were doing things poorly, but all of their problems were cultural. And when you have those cultural issues, that communication thing is the most important thing you can do. We had issues where the network admins would make firewall changes that would impact business people and other IT people, but not communicate those changes out. And you're probably saying, oh yeah, that happens to me every day. That's not right. That shouldn't happen, right? Those things should not happen. Proper change management, and I can talk to you about change management all day, but that's really important stuff. But when you have just adversarial relationships where people are not talking to each other, the success story there is I got them to finally talk to each other. I got them to understand that when you are doing something and you let other people know what you're doing, everybody can benefit from that, right? The whole it takes a village kind of concept. Right, but gosh, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've seen that has been terrible. But honestly, the worst thing is the lack of documentation. And when you ask somebody a question, they're like, I don't know, and they don't have a document to reference. So to save yourself that pain, just write it down. I don't care. Back of a napkin. You can have a drawer full of napkins. That's fine. That's better than not having anything. It really is. Anything else? Oh yeah.
You said that. One of the tactics that you used was network separation.
Yeah, network separation.
And you also went on to say that putting in VLANs isn't enough. And I understand, I agree with you. Mm-hmm. But I've dealt with telecom teams that seem to think it is.
Right. So let me explain that. So the question is about network separation of VLANs. Here's what I encounter a lot. Network admins understand the concept of how to split a network up. What they don't understand is the concept of information security. So in their mind, when I set up different networks, I'm not thinking about the fact that I can traverse from one network to another. What I'm thinking about is I set up a route, that route routes down this network chain, and that's security. What they don't get is if there's lateral possibility, I can exploit a machine to traverse a network boundary, even though it's not allowed to, right? Given even the routes that it's doing, and we have to stop that traversal. That's really where they break down in their heads, is we have to stop the ability to traverse the network from one network segment to another, not just have easy quality of service kinds of concepts, because that's where network admin space is, and I don't fault them for that. I think it's totally reasonable for them to think that. So I, as a security person, need to educate them and say it's just not enough. Right? Sometimes we need a hardware firewall. If I'm, for instance, if we're doing PCI, I'm going to say that your cardholder data environment should have a hardware firewall between your CDE and your other network. If you really want to be compliant, it doesn't have to, but that would be your best risk scenario, is to put a hardware firewall between that. In the event that you couldn't put a hardware firewall between that, we need to take very, very explicit steps to ensure nothing can get in or out of that CDE that we do not explicitly allow. Right? So it's just a different mindset for them. But yes, very often we break VLANs out and we go, oh, we're secure. That's not security, it's just routing. That's all it is, right? Anything else? Anyone else? All right, I think we're good. Thank you very much.